Health is a large word. It embraces not the body only, but the mind and the spirit as well. Not today's pain or pleasure, but the whole being and outlook of man. And folks, really, when you think about it, you realize that your emotions affect your health, and your beliefs affect your health, and your actions and what you eat affect your health, and even what you say affect your health. I think in no case is this more evident than among in our kids, when kids are still growing, when they're still forming their language, then when they're still very, very impressionable. And we are finding out more and more, and actually our speaker today has been on this webinar a couple of weeks ago, and he brought up a conclusive case that the sooner we can get kids started right, the sooner we can educate them, the sooner we can have their thoughts and their words aligned and help them to learn, this will abode well for them for the rest of their lives. If we don't start them off right, if we don't get them educated properly, this will affect them not just in academics, but also in their lives, in their health. Even many social vices can be traced back to kids not given the right kind of education. This does not mean, of course, that if you're given the right kind of education as a child, you're going to be a saint. But it does put you in very, very good standing. And so really, last time when Dr. Jones was on this webinar, the next day after his presentation, Dr. Norman Marvin, who has also done a webinar for us, he called and said this was one of the very, very best presentations he had ever heard on the topic. And so we actually wanted Dr. Marvin to be on the webinar tonight along with Dr. Jones, but unfortunately he was occupied doing something else. So please listen tight. MP3s will be available as well as the slides after the presentation. So, Sherry, are you on the line?
I am.
Okay, you want to go ahead and introduce him?
Certainly. Okay, Dr. Jones graduated from the University of Texas at Austin with a doctorate in bilingual and foreign language education with a minor in computer-assisted instruction. He also holds a bachelor's degree in bilingual education and a bachelor's degree in languages and linguistics, both from Antioch University. Gosh, I spent a lot of time in school. He's an associate director of the Lazanov Learning Institute of Dallas. Dr. Miles Jones, he has become a prominent specialist in the area of accelerated learning. As an accelerated learning consultant for Trajectories Associates in Paris, Dr. Jones has taught all over France, and he has become an expert in the statistical science of total quality management. He also worked in the French National School System as the Chief of Pedagogy for the Center of Formation Apprentice. He is the author of numerous texts, tapes, films, and articles on accelerated learning, Suggestipedia, language acquisition, memory training, reading, math, and quality management. That makes me tired just to think about all that.
Wow.
We are very, very glad to have Miles joining us tonight. Thank you. We very much look forward to this presentation.
Absolutely. So I guess I need to change presenters. Make sure I got that right. Okay. On your screen, you should get a bar telling you what to do.
I'm ready. All right. Is everyone seeing my screen?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of pictures.
That's great. Good. I'm really excited about people that are very interested in health because, and I'm also excited to hear what Dr. Marvin said. I think all of us have no problem accepting that, you know, if you don't get off the couch and exercise, you're going to be in a world of hurt as far as your health is concerned, right? The best HMO you're ever going to have is to get out and exercise. Good circulation will cure a wealth of problems. And the same thing goes for our neurophysiological development, and that's what I'm so excited that Dr. Ajibade and Dr. Marvin and Sherry Platt are so interested in, because the same thing goes for the brain. You really have to do push-ups for the brain. as far as that's concerned, so that you can develop your brain the way you need to. And that's a very simple concept to understand, but the way it works is, hold on here. Are you hearing me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. A second here. Because I'm
Trying to move.
My screen is frozen. Here we go. Let's see if we can do this. Here we go. So the push-ups for the brain are absolutely essential for the proper neurophysiological development of the brain itself. The process is called myelinization. And you are born with most all of the neurons that you're going to have in a lifetime, although it is possible to grow more. Mainly you've got what you're going to have. But they're not all activated. So if you're looking for better performance out of yourself or out of your children, you need to pay attention to the process of activating the rest of your brain. And as we grow, really only a very small part of our brain is activated when we are born. We only have the brain stem working. And then later on you start to add in the morbellum, the midbrain structures, the cerebellum, and then finally the cerebral cortex at about a year. And these brain structures come online very simply as a process of using what you have. Just like you use your muscles and they grow back stronger because you are using them. You're sending a signal to the body that you need to make those muscles grow back stronger. The fact is that children and adults, really, we love to learn, especially children. They are very eager to learn, and we're the ones who turn them off to that. But if you've got children who you're worried about now because they're having trouble, motivational problems with learning, a lot of that may well be because they've never been taught in a successful fashion, or they're very smart and they've never been challenged. So they're poking along in the educational system that's coming nowhere near close to challenging them. When you go faster rather than slower, you find these kids pick up their motivation incredibly. So accelerated learning is often the answer for children that are really demotivated, because most children want to succeed. So if you get in there and tell them that, if they will do their part by putting themselves into it, making a decision to commit themselves, I can guarantee they'll succeed if they're doing our program. We could go down a long list of what the problems are in the school system. We'll cover a little bit of that, but we really want to ask the question of what is accelerated learning? How do you do this? The thing about brain growth is that the brain, the more you put into it, the more it can hold. All memory is association. And the more information you learn, the more you myelinate those structures in the brain. Myelination is a sheath of fat along your nerve endings that is similar to the insulation on an electrical wire. Without that myelination, your nerve cells cannot pass along the biochemical impulse quickly or efficiently. So for all practical purposes, that part of the brain is not working. But as you use the skills that you have and the brain functions that you have, it myelinates the next set of structures. The interesting thing about this is that we have not found the limit to how much there is. The more you use it and the more our children gain these incredible skills that we didn't even think they could do this, it activates even more possibilities. And they're so far, it's really mind-blowing to see what our children have been doing. And you'll get a sense of that, I think, as we go through here. What is accelerated learning? Well, it is a curriculum that permits students to advance 3 to 5 times faster than traditional means. And I'm calling it a curriculum. It certainly is an approach or a methodology. There's no doubt about that. However, if it's not put down in a curriculum and thought through and refined, you're not likely to get the accelerated effect that you want. And accelerated learning is very simple. If you're not getting an acceleration of learning, then it's not accelerated learning. In other words, if it's not working, you're not doing it, or you're not doing it right, and you have no right to call it accelerated learning. You have to be. absorbing a large amount of information faster. So how do you do that? Well, there is a formula for guaranteed success in accelerated learning, or any kind of learning actually. If you have copious amounts of comprehensible input in the subject that you're trying to master. In other words, a lot of data put to you in a way that you can understand it, which is a big part of the curriculum process. If you have a need to use that information and a desire to learn it, then you will succeed at learning it to whatever level that you are satisfied with, or whatever level you're happy with. So a lot of it is up to you, whatever level that you want to reach. If you're happy just being able to communicate in a foreign language and you don't ever want to be really fluent, then that's probably where you'll stop, and no matter how much more you study, you're probably not going to get that much further. Just your subconscious has already stopped you at a level. Whereas if you set the goal you want to speak like a native, then you will get there eventually if you keep continuing to have that amount of comprehensible input and the opportunity to do so. When we do accelerated learning, we front load a lot of information. That means there's a right way and a wrong way to do that, obviously. That means you get a ton of data up front. And there's, in a language, for example, you will get, let's say normally in a normal language lesson you get maybe 12 lines of dialogue maybe. So in your first day, your first hour in an accelerated learning language classroom, you'll get 12 to 20 pages of dialogue. And then that will be presented to you in a very relaxing concert-like format. You'll have plenty of time to read the English that's right beside the Spanish or the French or whatever. So you will understand what you're getting. But it will have it will be simplified, but it'll still have all different tenses in there and a whole range of vocabulary. We don't use, specially designed dialogues. We use regular storybook type of information. It is simplified. It's about 3rd to 5th grade level reading material, but it's got all the tenses in it, all kinds of vocabulary. We do classics of literature, so they're illustrated. And then we work with that and, sort of rub them up against it in as meaningful and motivating way as possible. And about 80% of it rubs off on them. They're able to recognize those words. And then we'll do another 12 to 20 pages in a couple of days and keep on going that way. So, like I say, you can make this. We've all been dumped on before in the classroom. Where they just back the truck up to you and dump the whole language text on top of you in one move, all the rules, everything. And that's generally a different type of learning. That's generally what we call conscious learning. We're expected basically to memorize all that stuff, and that's really pretty much an impossible task. And sometimes the material is very dense and hard to understand, very difficult. You don't know how all those rules work together anyway. That's pretty much left up to the student to figure it out, and the practice is given is way insufficient. They're given too much too soon, and you end up frustrated and burned out. There's a different way to do it. We make everything very comprehensible. The things we ask them to do are designed to be simple enough that we allow them to win. We allow them to win, and they get sufficient practice at the things they're actually being allowed to do. And all the, they don't have to memorize all the vocabulary the first time around. The most frequently used vocabulary is going to come up again. Hopefully that gives you some idea of how we might go about it. In mathematics, it's a little different. And in mathematics and in other subjects, the kind of data you want to present or practice is different. You have to do a lot of mastery practice of your basic skills. So we find our students do master addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Let's say they're first grade age. They'd be expected to master all of that within 3 months max. And the vast majority of them do that, and some of them do it a lot quicker than that. So you can master any one of those skills from scratch in about 3 weeks. So even if and generally you're doing at least 2 at once, but even if you do them one after another, we're talking 3 months here. So some of them will have it down in a month, no problem. And as the older kids come into the program, they are expected to do it quicker than that. So here you are. You've done here's your accelerated learning curve, and it looks like a nice gradual curve, but I want you to look at that. normally in a regular classroom, you'd have this little curve, and it'd keep going up, kind of like it wouldn't take that steep dip upwards, like where you get to the midpoint of the curve. It would just keep going on and on, gradually going up. Whereas in accelerated learning, you've front-loaded all this information, and you've been practicing it, and it's basically in there. And it's kind of rattling around in the subconscious, and the subconscious is beginning to get a grip on all of that data and put it in its cubby holes and tie it all together, and at some point that clicks. It just clicks. And then the brain is really starting to take off, really. That learning curve just starts to take off because it's all coming together. Now, in a more traditional course, it's not going to happen because you basically are starving them for data, or not giving them data in a way that they can absorb it, so that they never really get enough information that they can ever do accelerated learning with it. You're never going to learn a language learning 12 lines a week. It's not going to happen. You know, it's not nearly enough, right? But it also has to be presented to you in a way that you can absorb it, you can understand it, and you can get it, and you can practice it. So in math, it's a little easier to look at this curve and show you the way it goes, because once our kids get their basic skills down, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, in a few weeks or a few months at most, then I can teach them anything. I can teach them all the rapid mental calculation techniques, and they can do them with facility, because there's nothing there that you can't do if you can multiply and divide. It's all simple stuff if you know your basic skills. And then they get their teeth into that, and it's exciting. They love it. They really love. They're doing large calculations in their head. They're doing stuff their father can't do with the calculator in his hand when he comes home from work in the evening, and they're getting a lot of laurels and for what they're doing. And some of these are kids that, remember, came in maybe even years behind in grade level, and with carrying a heavy burden of feeling like they were really dumb because they just couldn't get it in math. And now all of a sudden they're just the amazement of the neighborhood for what they can do, and their parents are always bragging on them, and that just keeps reinforcing it, and all of a sudden, bingo, math is their favorite subject, when they hated it before, when they first came into the class. So there's success begets success, and part of the way we do that is we know how to prioritize our objectives. We know which objectives are going to make the whole thing come together, make the mechanism tick. And obviously, when you're talking about education in general, and this is the advice I always give to my homeschool mothers that I work with, and fathers, mathematics and literacy, or literacy and mathematics, if you have to choose the one over the other. But if you do these two things right, reading and math, there's no way I can think of that you can go wrong. If you can read well and do math well, you can hand a kid a science book, and it's a piece of cake. And then, of course, they can do any of the other skills. So we always ask them to double up their time on those two things, and try not to throw everything in the kitchen sink at them, especially in the early years. Focus on reading and math in particular. So we do the same thing. And as far as prioritization of objectives go, basic skills. We do them first, and we do them fast, and we master them. There's nothing more demotivating than to take a child and say, we talked about the basic skills area, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and to take 4 years to develop those skills. It's like anything else, like learning to dance or roller skate. You're going through that learning curve, and you're feeling really clumsy and really stupid. And why would you want to drag that learning curve out for 4 years? It's no wonder why so many kids get demotivated and just give up on it. You want to get them through that as fast as you possibly can. So we hit it, and we push it, and we work hard at it. And in a few weeks' time, rather than a few years' time, they're through it, and they're already 4 years ahead of grade level. Because it takes from first grade to fourth grade, at least in the state of Texas, that's the amount of time they take to get through addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Let's be frank. You know, I understand the way mathematics works. This is square one. You're not going anywhere in mathematics until you can add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So, you know, let's get on it and get that done and get started with a real mathematics course. In reading, of course, we're talking phonics, sound symbol correspondences. And the sooner you get through that, the sooner the kids are going to be learning. And this is one of the ways in which we have really degraded our children, I think, and dishonored them, is because we don't recognize the true nature of the wonderful instrument of the brain they've been given. These children can learn so much faster than we have given them credit for if it's done correctly. And by not challenging them up to their potential, we dishonor them. We really do. When we take a kid who can learn to read within you know, easily within a few months' time at just about any age over 2, and we take years and years and years to teach them to read, it's not only dishonorable, it's abusive. You know, you're locking those kids into a system. Imagine yourself being forced to sit in a classroom for the next several years. You know, you go to school 8 hours a day learning how to read. Can you imagine that, David? Having to go sit in school for the next several years to learn how to read?
No.
How do you think it would affect you? Do you feel like you'd
I'll get bored. I'll get bored real quickly.
And you'd be mad, and you feel like you're just wasting your time. You probably wouldn't be that easy to deal with, would you?
No.
And what does that have to do with kids in first grade? A lot of those kids can actually read, and they're still going to be forced to sit there for years and taught how to read step by step, stuff they already know how to do. And this is the, you know, we've done, I'm thinking of the case of Peter Carter, who entered first grade already reading on a 6th grade level. Of course, they did not bounce him up to 6th grade because they don't do that sort of thing. But they made him stay, and then they retested him again in grade 5, and he was reading on grade level, right? So you remember that that's five years later, he's reading on a grade level 1 year less than what he entered school reading at. Does that make sense? So he sat through 5 years, 40 hours a week, learning to read something he already knew how to do. And by the end of that period, he had caught up with his classmates. So that's abusive, if you ask me. The best thing we can do to our children is to teach them early. But then that puts us often in opposition to the system, and we're in a situation where we have to deal with it. You know, we have to deal with children. It presents very important challenges, and those are challenges that both the parents and the child should honestly assess and decide whether they want to deal with that. We can definitely have a child that's way above grade level, but that presents special challenges, and not everybody wants to do that. But everyone does have challenges in life, so you just have to pick whether you'd rather have that challenge or maybe other types of challenges like being mediocre or being a year or two behind grade level. So choose your challenges. And
right. Now, when you're talking about the multiplication, does that mean that by their first grade or in the first few weeks they can do the entire multiplication table?
They've mastered it. They can do.
They have mastered it.
Within 3 months, generally, all our children starting at the earliest ages, and all of our children that start at normal first grade age, say 5 or 6, will have mastered addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. That means they have to do 2 sheets of 100 problems of multiplication within 5 minutes each, and they have to get 200s. So they have to do 100 problems, multiplication, in 5 minutes and get them all correct. And they have to do that twice to show mastery. Because mastery is getting it right away every time. And so to us, getting it 2 times. Now if they come in and they're a teenager already, right, then they only have 3 minutes to do it. So we just have those 2 times for teens and preteens. So preteens get a little bit more time to do it, and then they'll have to do them all 4 together and get 400s in say 20 minutes, because the kind of errors we get at this point are 5 plus 5 is 25. They're mixing their operations. So a little bit more practice, and the brain sorts that out too, and they don't make those kind of mistakes. And we can start them as early as 2. When they can speak and understand their native language, they are using symbols. They are auditory symbols. The word apple is not an apple, but if you can understand that when it's spoken to you, then you're using symbols. And your brain is ready to understand and learn and use the visual symbols that are involved in learning reading and math. That would be the letters and the sounds that go with each of those symbols, so you can sound out words, and the numbers and their quantities and the numeration concepts that allow you to add and subtract and multiply and divide. So your brain is ready to do that. The problem is that they have been generally a child's visual acuity. Remember, we talked about brain development. A child's visual acuity is not developed yet to the point where they can distinguish between small prints. So they're perfectly capable of reading, but not when you're talking about using standard print. You have to start out with letters and numbers that ours are a half a page tall. So they're very large. They're about, 4, 5, 6 inches tall, the letters and the numbers that we use. And then gradually we work them down bit by bit by bit. And the brain develops the visual acuity because it's being demanded of it. Does that make sense to you, David?
Mm-hmm.
It's myelinating those structures, just like if you work your arms or your legs, those muscles are going to grow back stronger because they're being used. It's being demanded of them. And the same thing with your visual acuity. So that will develop faster. In fact, the entire brain will develop faster. The most important thing you can do to increase your child's intelligence is to start them early, because you will activate more of the brain as you go, because you go faster. It's interesting. You literally make your child more intelligent. I
was about to ask that question. I was like, okay, what is the advantage to getting them all this information at this early age? When how does that make them better people by cramming them with information at an early age?
Well, that's an excellent question. I mean, how does it make them better people? Which is probably a good question to start with. As far as I'm concerned, it's not just about developing children's intelligence and allowing them to compete in the world. It's about developing children with strong moral character. That has to be number one, and their spiritual development, and that's number one. I'm not into creating evil geniuses. I want to produce children that are well balanced and comfortable within their own skin and feel good about themselves and what they're doing, not kids that are being pushed into neurotic behaviors. And yeah, you can do that, but let's not. Let's be sensitive to how we're bringing our kids along, and let's not make them neurotic by pushing them too hard. Generally, it's not a problem. Generally, children love learning so much. You're the one who's going to be pushed, because you'll find out, my goodness, this child will do as much as I can give them. They'll do 4 times as much as I have time to give them. That I think they could probably do 10 times as much as I have time to prepare and feed to them. So another of the advantages is just a head start. I mean, you start reading at 2. You're not just going to be 4 years ahead of the children that start reading at 6. But your brain will have developed faster. You will literally be accelerating in your ability to learn. So by the time they're lining up on the starting line, you're going to be zipping past them on a speed racer. So that is in a world in which a small edge can mean the difference between failure and success. This is a very, very large edge. And the final and maybe even the most important thing is that children love to learn. They really do. Until we train it out of them, they love to learn. And it is so exciting for them. And they're just so jazzed by it. they're just really excited and just full of joy about how much they're learning and how exciting it is. It's just a delight to be with these children because they're so well spoken at such an early age and so thoughtful and so considerate and capable of using their minds to do higher order thinking at such a younger age. It's just a real delight to see that in young children. So it develops them really on an emotional level and on a moral level as well as on an academic level, and they love it. So those are, I think, really excellent reasons to start your child younger, other than just simply giving them a competitive edge. So once we get them started, when we do accelerated learning, it's integrated in the curriculum that they will do rapid mental calculation when they're doing mathematics, of course. They will do speed reading in our reading courses, and they'll do memory training as a standard part of our routine. They're woven in there. So one of our programs, Super Math 3, this is the one we start first graders with, and by the end of what would be their first grade year, they're doing problems like the one you see, 655 squared in their head, and considered a pretty easy problem. So
wow.
That's pretty good for, it's not that hard, but I think it's pretty good for a first grader.
Wow.
And a number of other problems along those same lines. A lot of the stuff they will never ever learn. Keep in mind that all mathematical ability is a result of two types of processes. And you could make the same parallel to reading too, but two different types of processes. One is you have a database of memorized information. And then the other one is what you're able to do with that, the kind of calculations you know how to do and how well you can build on those. Does that make sense? For example, that's what learning the multiplication tables is all about. Multiplication is just advanced addition, where you are adding groups of numbers. So, instead of you've got 41 nickels, instead of having to sit down there and count 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, that's addition. And doing that 41 times, you can just multiply 41 times 5, right, and get 205. So we know how to do that. But the way we're able to do that is because we know that 5 times 1 is 5, and 5 times 4 is 20. So we know those things. So we can, and we know the process to multiply it. So by giving the children a much larger database of memorized information, they'll learn their cubes of all their two-digit numbers up to 100. They'll learn the prime numbers up to 1,000. All of these things, and by teaching them, procedures and processes that will allow them to manipulate numbers in a bunch of different ways. So you'll have half a dozen ways to multiply or divide, and you will use the one that's the most efficient for the numbers that you have. You use the different method if they end in a 0, different method if they end in a 5, different method if they end in a 1. So you'll have different ways to go at it that are so much easier than doing, and you'll know the standard traditional ways to do it, long multiplication, etc., and so on. So you just use the technique that's the easiest to do with the numbers you have at hand. So you really build a powerful intellect by developing these kind of structures. In our super reading, of course, the kids do something very similar. They will read a book a week generally.
Book a week?
A book a week, and these are classics of literature. So they will read. Last week they read The Hunchback of Notre Dame, in class, in our reading class we have going now. And before that they'd read Sherlock Holmes, and they read a different book every week, and they have to use their speed reading skills in order to keep up with this. So that gives them a lot of strength. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the results we've gotten with these kids, because we did start this out in a school forum. This began to be developed. I went into I was doing work with executives in Paris, and that was a good life, David. I enjoyed that a lot, living in Paris. I was getting paid a lot of money to work with top executives, and I could take I was all over France, so I could take the TGV back to Paris every weekend, and it was very nice. And then I really felt called to come back to the United States and go into the inner city schools because that's where the problems were, and that's where the solutions to the problems had to be found. And I took my accelerated learning experience and put it to work there. And this is one of the studies we did. Reading is always a priority in first grade. So I had children that had gone through our program. Of all the children that had been with us for the entire program, 100% of them passed their reading criteria, and I like that. That's a grade I can live with, 100% passing. Whereas you can see in at Rogers Elementary School, the rest of the school and the rest of the school district, you only have about 70% passing in first grade. And indeed, in all grades, only about 70% were passing. And that should really tell you something. You know, if they don't get it in first grade, they don't get it. Only 1 out of 10 will ever be a fluent reader. They will tend to stall somewhere, you know, maybe 3rd to 5th grade reading, where they start to get out of their speaking vocabulary and can no longer guess the words. They get into longer, more technical words that they can no longer guess, and then that's where they stall out because they don't really have word attack skills. But our children had done first, second, and third grade, all the first, second, and third grade reading curriculum in both English and Spanish by the end of first grade. So that was not all of them, but 12 out of 20 of our kids had done first, second, and third grade curriculum in both English and Spanish because they were bilingual students. So out of the 22 students, I started with a group of second graders, out of 22 students, they read on the average of that 3.8 means third grade level 8th month. So these were second graders, so they're reading, the average of the class was almost 2 years above grade level. 13 read above third grade level, 10 read above fourth grade level, 7 read above fifth grade level, and 5th read above 6th grade level. We even had one kid that was already reading on an 8th grade level. That's outstanding for inner city kids. Outstanding for inner city kids.
After how many? After 8 months, did you say?
This was just at the end of second grade. But remember, half of these kids could not read. Half of these kids could not read when we started second grade, which caused me to move to first grade because I figured, no, I'm going to be teaching them reading anyway. When I asked to transfer to the first grade, they said, you don't want to teach first grade, you have to teach literacy. I said, that's exactly why I want to teach first grade, because I'm having to teach literacy in second grade. I want to go back and teach it from the beginning. So when we did our class, was the first section of first graders I worked with, they ended up 75% of them were above the 50th percentile, and obviously the norm would be 50% above the 50th percentile. 25% were above the 90th percentile, and you can see that that's a lot more than you would normally get. The majority of the students finished the first, second, and third grade reading curriculum in both English and Spanish. 14 out of 20 students were double promoted to third grade. That was good. Wow. I really didn't expect we'd get that. We moved on to third grade, and we'll come back to that because those children were they were challenged on their transfer to first grade, to third grade from first grade. I did the program with 6th graders in mathematics, and when we started out, these kids, only 46% of these children, these are 6th graders, only 46% could score 100 on basic math facts that were designed for elementary school students. Okay, I mean, we're talking about 2 plus 2, 7 times 6, 12 divided by 4. We're talking about the 100 basic math facts scores, of which you need to have mastered all of them, and you're supposed to have mastered them by 4th grade. Right? So 13% of them actually scored below 70 out of 100 problems, and only 28% were able to finish in 5 minutes or less, which is too slow. So after 7, what's that?
This was when you first met them. This was like a test for you.
Right, I tested them the first day. First day of 6th grade. First day of 6th grade. Now, these are the results after about 7 to 10 days of practice. Some of them got more because of the way things were scheduled. And then I was transferred to another class. So this is the results we got after about a week to 2 weeks of practice. We're only, the daily practice with a lot of, sixth graders, you got a lot of resistance from them trying to make them work hard. But whereas only 46% scored 100, now 60% were scoring 100s on their basic skills tests. Whereas 13% scored below 70, now only 5% scoring below 70. Where only 28% were finishing in 5 minutes or less, now 58% were. So look at that. It's not hard to imagine that within a few more weeks' time, these kids would have been up to speed on their math skills and able to move ahead, right? Whereas they were right now 2 years below grade level at least. Now, the children we started with that had been double promoted to from first to third grade, they had their parents had come to me. They had run into a teacher that really didn't like the idea of double promoting children in the inner city, and so I agreed to champion their cause, and their parents came to me because I lived in the neighborhood with them. I lived there in the barrio, and they came to me, and we filed a civil rights lawsuit against the school district, and the state of Texas in discrimination against Hispanic youngsters in the way they handled their double promotion policies. Because this is really standard stuff out in the suburbs, to double promote children that are going to be wasting their time staying in first grade when they already know how to read, just like the case of Jimmy Carter there we talked about earlier. So they dug in their heels. They didn't really, give us any ground here. Now remember, only 6 of the 14 had been sent back, right, by these teachers. After the first 6 weeks, she had failed them, sent them back to second grade now. And these kids were fine. They were, they were younger. You had to work with them a little differently. I understand that, but they had already read the third grade curriculum, and there were children in this teacher's class who could not read at all. However, they had been socially promoted. You understand? You get promoted just because you get to be a year older, right? Oh. And even regardless of how well you do on your tests. So they had a right to be there. I once made the comment that children should not be allowed to go into second grade if they couldn't read, and I had another teacher that turned to me and said, well, Dr. Jones, then we'd all be teaching first grade. Maybe that's what you need to do if you can't let them go into second grade. Second grade teacher is going to open the book to the second grade curriculum and start teaching. And if you're not there, then you have just your entire educational future is probably over. So these children were given, we finally got these kids together and challenged and went into a Mensa conference and took on these Mensa PhDs in a contest of speed and accuracy in calculating powers and roots. And
what's a Mensa?
A Mensa is the High IQ Society. These are people that are in the top 2% of the most intelligent people in the nation. They have to take different types of intelligence tests to prove that fact, that they're in the top 2%. So we asked the Mensa audience if there were any people with advanced degrees, and there were 3 PhDs in the audience, and we asked them to come up and form the team for the Mensans. And we gave them electronic calculators, and they competed against some of these very children you see in the picture, and the children had pencil and paper, but they had no electronic calculator. They had to do the problems mentally, and they had to be first, and they had to be correct in order to get the answer, to win the point for the, both sides had to write down both the problem and the answer. And of course you could write down anything else you wanted. You could do it on paper if you want, but the children knew that they could never win if they did all these multiplications out longhand. They had to do them mentally. And these are some of the problems that they were given. like 1,025 squared, or the fifth root of, what is that, 2,887,174,368. The cube root of 373,248, and then square it. So those are pretty nice problems for first graders. And remember, they were doing them in their head with a minimum pencil and paper stuff. So you can see over to the right, our team was called the Genios, which means geniuses, and Jones's geniuses in Spanish. And their team were called the Menses. And apparently no one explained to the high IQ society that Mensa in Spanish means idiot. So it was the geniuses against the idiots.
Well, no brainer, huh?
Yeah, so the geniuses won, despite the fact that they were first graders. They were actually in second grade by now, so they had just started second grade. Well, some of
the kids beat the Menses?
Yeah, the kids beat the Menses. They beat them by 14-6. So they trashed them pretty good.
And are those the Menses we're looking at there, the two sides?
This is actually a later demonstration that we did for the press, and these are all math. We have math professors in this crew. We also have the chairman of the Dallas School Board there. We have Mensa members on this board and various education experts of different kinds. And the children have never been beaten in a competition before, and you can see that they have calculators. The experts have calculators. So they've never been beaten. It could happen because it's often very, very close when you're talking about going up against a PhD, a math professor with a calculator in his hand, and you're a first grader. It can be very close, but they've never been beaten. So that was pretty nice.
Oh, wow.
So when we
I'm sorry, let me just mention real quick, folks, if you have a question, there's a panel to your right where you can type in your questions, and as we go along, but towards the end we'll open up for more questions. But if a question comes to mind, go ahead and just type it down, and I'll be reading it and compiling them over here. Sorry about that, Dr. Jones. Keep going.
It's okay. So when we did this with fourth and fifth grade, our next classes were first graders. So we got the same kind of success rate that we did before. And then of course they were really just about as good in English as they were in Spanish, which was a wonderful result to have with first graders that come to you and most of them don't speak any English. So we've done this demonstration since then with all different types of students with different ages, races, and in different places, different socioeconomic strata, and they've never been beaten, not yet. So but it's good. It could happen. So there's good news about accelerated learning, and the good news, and there's bad news too. The good news is that it's a reality. It really is a science, and it really does work. We can definitely guarantee students way above grade level. That's the good news. The bad news is that then once this becomes a reality, then you have to deal with students that are way above grade level. And that's a challenge, and it's one that parents need to take seriously and students need to take seriously, because there's, how are you going to feed them back into a system that's intent on homogenizing students all to the same mediocre level? Well, not very well. It's going to produce real challenges along the way. You got children that are capable of doing stuff on much higher level. The whole curriculum has to be rewritten for them. You couldn't take these little 8-year-old kids now that are capable of doing algebra and hand them a high school algebra text. It's way too dense. It's just not, they're not going to be able to comprehend it. It's got to be explained to them in a lot simpler fashion and taken slower and easier. Okay, but at the same time, you would never, ever ask a high school or even a college student to do the kind of algebraic calculations in their head that these kids are doing. So, verbally you've got to break it down and explain it to them and go slower on the concepts. But as far as the calculation skill that's involved, there's not a college student that could keep up with them. And actually, there's not an algebra teacher that could pass the test we give these kids, because it's just not, because it's based on a set of rapid mental calculation skills that we developed, and the algebra teacher wouldn't know them. He just wouldn't. And they have to, when they get into algebra, to pass our algebra, they have to solve 100 equations in 30 minutes and get them all correct. And they have to do that twice within the time frame, and they get 30 minutes. So, obviously, I'm not saying an algebra professor couldn't do it, but we'd have to teach them the method so that they could do it quickly, right? Their brains are fine. It's just they haven't used the methodology we've used, so they might not be able to. Well, I'm sure they wouldn't be able to do some of the problems. They wouldn't be able to do the cube roots of 6-digit numbers in their heads, for example, in time to do this test. And we've taken it to algebra professors before, and they thought we were joking. So we know the truth here. But the point is, if we continue to do the things in traditional education the way we've done them before, well, we're going to continue to get the results if we've gotten, right? And I don't think any of us are really satisfied then. Now we're going to have to go to talk about specific examples, because people are just not happy with me if I don't get down to specifics. So what I've chosen to talk about is the SAT test. So if that works for you, David, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about how, because we work with all ranges of ages, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how the kind of accelerated learning training we do prepares them to do well on what is probably the most important test they'll ever take, because it determines what schools they can get into, and probably more important, who's going to pay for that. So students that do well can get their entire college education paid for without their parents having to mortgage their house, and without the student having to come out with a huge debt burden when they're done. And those are very, very important things there. So we'll look at the SAT. Does that look like a good example? Good idea?
Absolutely.
So this is what the Scholastic Achievement Test is. It's numbers and operations, high school algebra, high school geometry. Only a little bit of what might be considered Algebra 2, just a tiny bit. You'll have a few questions. Some statistics, some probability, not much, and some data analysis, mainly being able to look at charts. It's not really hard stuff. It is higher order thinking because it's all word problems. You have to figure out what they want you to do. But it's not really that hard in a test to take. Now, you're going to have reading sections and math sections, and you also have a writing section. So you're going to have 3 sections of each, and then you're going to have one test section that they use to test new questions for the SAT, and you won't know which one it is. So it takes several hours to do the test. Now, for the reading and writing part, it's vocabulary. And there's lists of thousands of words of vocabulary that you need to know, and that vocabulary comes from doing extensive reading. That's mainly what it's all about, and that's what we do. Remember, we talked about our reading courses where they read a book a week. That's where they get that. And as far as writing competence is involved, the more you have read, the more you have a database of really good style and correct grammar and vocabulary. So yeah, you're going to need to do some study in grammar, and of course especially in writing composition. But the kind of writing they do for the SAT is very simple and very easy to master if you have good writing skills. The SAT is specific to measuring to see whether your child is worth training to be a professional. Okay, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It tests your child to see if they have the skills, the accuracy, and the speed to be worth training as a professional. And that's it. If they're too far behind, the college doesn't want them, because not the good colleges, because they got to go back all the way back and pick up their skills from elementary school and bring them up to speed. They got to, and they're not prepared to do that. They want to take the best students. There's 3 secrets of the SAT. Are we ready?
Ready.
Here's the first one. The SAT is a speed math, speed reading, and speed writing test. It's about speed. What you can do in the comfort of your living room given plenty of time is not good enough for the SAT. You have to be able to do it fast. Remember SAS, speed, accuracy, and skill. Number 2, there's no problem on the SAT which requires a calculator. They're very good about this. There is no problem on the SAT which requires a calculator. So if you can do the calculations in your head, you're going to be faster, 3 to 5 times faster than anyone who has to go to a calculator to do the problem. And that's a pretty incredible thing to discover, that children that have to use calculators are going to be 3 to 5 times slower than those who don't, because it breaks your concentration. It detours you. You have to enter the information into the calculator so it can do your thinking for you and punch up the numbers, and assuming you get it done correctly, you then got to go back and plug it into the problem. Okay, all of that takes time. You might make a mistake along the way. You can't think on your feet, think your way through the problem to the solution. So you're slower and you make more errors. All right, so the third secret to the SAT is there is no problem on the SAT which requires a calculator. I'm mentioning that again because basically we have become calculator dependent, and the SAT is designed to see how well you can do it. If you have to use a calculator, fine, but it does not give you an advantage to be able to have a calculator. It's not needed for the math that they have on the SAT, and it slows you down, right? And they have some givens that are on there. They give you certain formulas like the Pythagorean theorem, the Pythagorean ratios, and the area of a circle, the circumference of a circle, things like that. And, our policy is always, if you have to refer to that, you have definitely not done enough practice. Our students have to have that memorized and have worked with those kind of problems so that they know all that information without having to look. Because that takes time going back, and obviously you haven't practiced enough if you don't know those things. So the SAT score is 200 to 800 points. You get 200 points for writing your name on the paper. 800 points is perfect.
And I understand Bill Gates got a perfect score.
Did he?
Yeah, I got a perfect 800 in his math SAT.
Wow. I hadn't heard that. That's interesting. Makes sense though. So they go in order from easy to hard. So number 1 will be the easiest. Number 25 will be the hardest. They're multiple choice, 5 options. If you get one wrong, they're going to subtract. Of course, you get that one wrong, but they'll also subtract an additional 1/4 point because they assume that you guessed if you got it wrong. So that's the guess penalty. Some people don't understand that. Look, if you have an option of 4, right, and you go through and just guess, what's your chances of getting it right?
1/4.
25%, right? So they assume for every 4 you missed, you were guessing, right? And they take 1 off for every 4 you missed. So they take 1/4 off for every one that you missed, which I don't think is a very reasonable assumption. But in any case, I didn't design the SAT. Now, in the grid-in problems where you will actually fill in a numerical value, there's no penalty for wrong answers. Right? All this matters as far as your strategy. Here's the information that's given on the SAT, information that, of course, SuperMath students are required to have memorized. This is what they call the guess factor, where you will lose. So whenever you miss a problem, you'll miss not 1 point, but 1 1/4 points. So the standard wisdom is if you can eliminate several wrong answers, it's worth guessing. The super math wisdom is don't get any problems wrong. Guessing is not necessary. The point of giving you these little homilies is that, you know, what do you do to boost your child's grade on the SAT? Well, you go take an SAT prep course, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. This is what an SAT prep course is going to teach your child. They're going to teach you how to guess better. Okay, so, and we'll show you exactly how they're going to teach them. Here's an example, multiple choice by estimation, right? Okay, you got two parallel lines and a transversal that runs through them. So what's the value of x? Well, this is what Kaplan would say. Since x is less than 90, you can see that x is a small, x up at the top is a small angle. X is less than 90, you can eliminate D and E, right? So x is small, so you can eliminate C also, so you're down to A and B, and you got a 50% chance of getting it right. Well, here's the super math method. You can see the x and down there the 3x plus 20. Add them together and you got a 180-degree span. So x plus 3x plus 20 is equal to 180 degrees. That means x is equal to 40. So you got a 100% chance of getting it right. Here's multiple choice by eyeballing. But I'm not kidding. This is what they teach. They teach you how to guess. They teach you how to guess better. And you know, they'll have a little one-month program where you learn how to guess the answers better. And that's not going to get your child into an engineering school. You'll notice multiple choice by eyeballing. You can see that the diagonal does not go from one corner down to the bottom corner. That would be half. So it's a little less than half the shaded region, right? So you can also see that it's a square. So 4 is the side of the square. 4 times 4, the area, the whole thing is going to be 16, right? And half of it would be a little less than half. The shaded area is going to be less than half. So we know that. The shade is less than half, so you can eliminate C, D, and E and guess A or B. Well, the super math method is that this is a standard Pythagorean triangle where BC is equal to 4, the hypotenuse is equal to 5, so the other side is going to be equal to 3, and half of 3 times 4 would be, that's the formula for the area of a triangle, would be 6. So by the Kaplan method, you have a 50-50 chance of getting it right. By the super math method, you have a 100% chance of getting it right.
Does Kaplan really do this? This
Yeah,
is really how they train kids to do.
That's straight out of their book.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's what they do. They teach them to guess, right? So we figure it's better to teach them the math so that they don't have to guess. So grid and problems, you see, you'll fill in the little numbers there. Now here's the standard method. You know, answer all the grid and problems because a guess is better than a blank, and you won't be penalized for a wrong answer. Now I want to tell you something. You know, do you realize how many possibilities there could be here? There could be almost 10,000 possibilities here, right? You're not going to guess the right answer. You know, you're just not. You know, so that's, if you're just filling in grids, you know, thinking maybe you'll get it right, you're just wasting your time. You know, the super math method is you answer all your grid and problems quickly and accurately, because guessing is not going to help you on a grid and problem. So as far as using the calculator goes, we probably talked about that a good bit, but there are certain traps that are in the SAT for people that are overly dependent on calculators, and a lot of people are. For example, if the sum of all integers, that's just regular numbers that aren't fractions, from 2 to 49, if you summed all those up, 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, all the way up to 49, and you subtracted from that number the sum of all integers, you subtracted that number from the sum of all integers from 1 to 50. What's the answer? Well, people that are overly dependent on calculators are going to grab the calculator and start adding up, you know, 1 to 50, right? Write it down, and 2 to 49, write it down, subtract it. But that is a trap, you know, and praying that they don't get anything wrong. This is a really standard exercise in doing summations. And you can notice on the top is 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus all the way to 50. And then the part you're subtracting it from on the bottom is 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 49. Well, after you subtract that, what's left? The 1 and the 50. And that kind of problem, you should be able to look at that and recognize that right away, that the difference is 51. But you would spend a lot of time if you're trying to answer that somehow by adding all those numbers up on the calculator. And it'd be time wasting.
Mm-hmm.
You have about 1 minute per problem on SAT, about 1 minute.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to answer as many questions as you can pretty much instantaneously to save time for the problems that really do, the hard ones that really do demand a lot of thought and working things out. So you may have 1 minute, but you shouldn't be using it all. You should be using it, answering questions as fast as you can, because you'll have some hard ones that you will need that extra time for. So here's a word problem. The ratio of celebrities to agents at a Hollywood party is 13 to 1. If there are 429 celebrities, how many agents are there? Well, here's the Kaplan method. Again, they're guessing, right? Since the agents are fewer than 429, eliminate C, D, and E. Yes, A or B, you have a 50% chance, right? Here's the SuperMad method. This is a standard proportion. It's an easy problem. It's 429 over 13 is equal to x over 11. You solve that by cross multiplication, which would mean you would have to get the answer, you'd have to multiply 33 times 11, which is a particularly easy multiplication to do. So you get 363. And that would be pretty easy for a SuperMath student to do. So the question we pose as a society is, what dangers are we getting ourselves into when, as a nation, we cannot educate our own citizenry to do the challenging jobs necessary to our security and prosperity. We brain drain the rest of the world. And you know what? I'm glad those people can find a piece of the American dream. The only problem is, where's the part of the American dream that's left for kids that are born here? They should have a shot at the American dream too, by having an educational system that's worthy of them. More than 54 million Americans are functionally illiterate, including 86% of those in prison, 48% welfare mothers, 72% of unemployed youth, and 68% of arrested juveniles. We rank 49th in literacy in the world. Does that make any sense to you?
No.
You know what?
Not in the country of Mark Twain and Abraham Lincoln.
No. Absolutely, not in the country that is the most advanced in so many ways, certainly as far as prosperity is concerned. One of the most successful programs to prevent recidivism and people getting out of prison is called the Hensel Hazelwood Student Loan Program here in Texas. Basically, prisoners will do college studies by correspondence while they're in prison, and they can earn a degree while they're in prison. And when they get out, they have choices. And guess what they choose? They have a choice of earning a decent living and not going back to crime. And they choose to earn a decent living and not go back to crime. They have choices. What kind of choices do a guy have that's illiterate and can't get a decent job? I'm not saying that justifies criminality, but it definitely reduces your choices, right? You're pretty much condemned to some pretty low-paying jobs in many cases. So, you educate them and you reduce all these social problems: criminality, welfare, unemployment. That's worth thinking about, isn't it? United Way did a survey a few years ago and found that 53% of workers in Los Angeles are functionally illiterate. Wow. That's a lot. In 2000, urban reading statistic. Now, this is urban areas, the cities. Only 1/3 of third graders read on level. And that really happened in first grade, not third grade. It happened in first grade. And guess what? Only 1/3 of high school students pass algebra. it's the same third. Can we be pretty sure about that? And only 1/3 of students finish high school. In the inner cities, they have a 66% dropout rate. That's gone up a little bit. They've gotten that a little better, but a lot of that gain has been achieved by, this was 2000, and these were their reported scores, by corralling. In other words, just keeping the students in the school building. You know, that doesn't mean they're doing any better. And they hand out more certificates, graduation certificates, but that doesn't mean that the children can read. A lot of kids come out of high school and they still can't read. But that 1/3 that did not, that 1/3 that learned to read in first grade went on to graduate. The 2/3 that did not learn to read in first grade failed, never finished high school. So it's something to think about. You know, do your job there, and it makes a real big difference to those children's lives. More than half of U.S. graduate students are foreign-born mathematics, so we're not producing the students to handle the best paying, most interesting, and most challenging jobs in our country. And the fact is, you know, people have lowered expectations. What can you expect out of inner city kids? Well, okay, I know what you can expect. I taught in the inner city. I proved it can be done. And that's why God led me to do that, so that I know for a fact that there's nothing wrong with those children. It's the problem is in the system. Because if we cannot expect excellence from ourselves and from our children, the only thing we can expect is that we will not have it.
So true.
That's right. So, you know, pushing them to high expectations without giving them the means to do so is abusive. And this is done a lot in the schools. They have pep rallies before the standardized testing at the end of the year. You know, how's a pep rally going to make you score better in mathematics? Right? Literally, they do. They have pep rallies, right? for standardized testing, right? So, you know, that's, you know, they're trying to get them psyched up, you know, and motivated. And the fact is, you know, if you can't lead them there to know how to do it, you don't need a pep rally if you've got your students and they know they can do it. They're excited to show what they can do, you know. So if you're going to put high expectations on them and not show them how to get there, that's very abusive. It makes them feel bad. It makes them feel dumb. It makes them feel worthless. And then they act out on those internal frustrations. When you have instruction that fails, and remember, like I said, all this is determined within a few weeks of entering first grade. They'll either start succeeding or they'll start failing within a few weeks. And it has a lot more to do with the system than it does with the quality of the children. So they fail in math and reading. And that causes them to fail, of course, in all their other subjects, right? And that causes them to have low self-esteem. They're frustrated. They become apathetic, or depressed, or angry. They start to act out against the school, or they put their head down on the desk and go to sleep. So they become apathetic or angry. Either way is acting out. They channel their energy into other areas than school when they're out of school. And we know what those other areas are, right? What's out there? Gangs, drugs, promiscuity. All those things are options for children in the 21st century. Right?
What percentage of the school shootings do you think is due to failure in academics and math and reading?
I have no idea. That's a very good question, and I don't know.
Okay.
No, yes, it would be interesting. I know the schools have become so politically correct that teachers can't touch students, they'll get in real serious trouble. So they have pretty much abandoned the ground to the students who savage each other, and sometimes the teachers, with impunity. So, you know, I was a pretty bad student, but I would have never thought of taking a gun to school. But kids fantasize about that these days, I suppose. But that's when you take students in and you have instruction that works. Well, okay, the students succeed, and that, like I say, that happens within maybe a few hours they start to succeed or they start to fail rather than a few weeks. It just becomes evident that they're succeeding after a few weeks. But when you can allow them to win, allow them to succeed in math and reading, and then hey, they can do anything. It's all easy if you can read and do math. And they enjoy it. I mean, it's simple. You like doing the things you can do well, and you tend to not like doing the things you don't do well. Does that make sense? So if you clear up their problems, you have set the stage for them to turn around their entire motivation towards that subject and towards the whole process of schooling and education. So, you also imbue that they have worked hard, they've been rewarded for it with a set of skills and with the approval of society and their teachers and their parents. And that all, when they start getting that, it really directs their energy. They want more of it, and they act into societal goals for their future. For example, they believe the warnings they're told about gangs and drugs and premarital sex, right? And they are too busy preparing themselves to be productive citizens and to they have dreams. They're too busy preparing themselves to achieve their dreams to get hung up in those traps and those pitfalls that so many kids do fall into.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it's all about. Doing something for those children. Questions, comments, math jokes?
Do you have any? Wow, this has been great. This has been this is a little different from the first presentation you did for us. This is really good. Thank you so much.
Did I get the wrong slideshow?
No, you got the right one. You just went on some different directions, which is good. It's good because I've learned a lot more now. Someone says, "Gee, I wish I had you as my teacher."
Well, it can still happen. We do have these curriculums that we do sell, and they're self-contained. So they have the lessons are on DVD, and you have the textbook and the posters and the activity cards, and it's a whole self-contained system. And of course, I teach the lessons on the DVD, so you can do it for math, or your children can do it, or you can do it. We have adults that take our programs too, in reading and math, and language too.
That was another question someone had. Do you have this learning method? Can it be used with older people in their 40s to 70s?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So okay, so and these can all be gotten from your website, homeschooldoctor.com. Is that correct?
Right. You can see the various materials that we have available, and you can order them through the website. But our parents are required to do it with their children, because we're all about what works, right? And we know that if you can't do education by parking your child in front of the TV, you can't do that. You can't expect them to educate themselves. You are their role model. And so if you do the program with them, we have never had a child fail when their parent has done the program for them. So that is what matters to us, the children not failing. So we require the parent to do it with them. And I have, one grandmother that's working with her grandson, and she calls me up every few days because she's had a snag. She was not a math person when she went through school, so she carries that burden. But boy, she has really applied herself, and her son is, when she first called me up, it was like he was a lost cause, but they were going to try this anyway. And now the kid is just going through the roof, and he's teaching her sometimes. But
oh, wow.
We get a lot of results like that from our children. We get a lot of children that come in with math phobia and go out with math as their favorite subject, just really motivated and really enjoying it. That's a great feeling to be able to do that.
Right. Do your instructors have to have any special training to use your curriculum?
Well, all of our parents are instructors. And now we do the instructors that teach in the classroom, because we do, and several places have classrooms set up. in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, in the Houston area, because we find that it does make it a lot easier. You can do it all on your own, and that's fine. But we find that by creating an environment where high achievement is the norm, that's a priceless environment to be able to put a child into. Everyone becomes a high achiever because everybody's doing it. Everyone gets their ribbons for the various mileposts that they go through. Everybody wins, and everyone gets there. Even kids that are really just trying to skate through doing the least possible, their perception of what the least acceptable level of effort is really way up here. So because you created an environment where high achievement is normal, right? So they end up being high achievers really despite themselves. They do. So everyone ends up with a very high level of achievement. So that's a very, very precious thing. And also you get more support. You get a shoulder to cry on when you need it, and you just get people who have been through and done it before and have the expertise to do it. Personally, I don't require my teachers to have a specific, say, level of education to go in. Generally, I work with other entities. There's some bookstores or some of the homeschool organizations I work with will require that teachers have a college degree, and that's fine with me. But if I have a good teacher that knows what they're doing, it really doesn't matter to me or the kids. What matters is whether they can do the things they're expected to teach the kids how to do. So they have to go through the program themselves and get those levels of achievement. Like if you're going to teach algebra, you got to be an equation master. And if you can solve 100 equations in 30 minutes and get them all right, I don't care if you have a college degree or not, you'll be a fine teacher in most cases.
I think that's very important, yes. One of our guests or our attendees tonight is on the board of a Christian school, and she's been sending me a lot of questions about the relationship between health and the diet and how that affects their learning. But let me just read out the whole thing. Barbara Reed Stitt was, I guess, the compound name, was a probation officer that learned that the diet of the prisoners made the difference in whether they returned to prison or not. If they followed proper diets, only 5%, about 5% returned to prison. I was hoping we could learn how nutrition and health impacted the learning of these children.
Yeah, well, that's a wonderful question, and I do emphasize this, but it's kind of hard for a classroom teacher to kind of dictate what goes on in the home with these kids. But I have been part of special programs where we took ADHD kids and gave them nutritional supplements, glyconutrients, and monitored and made attempts at least to monitor their diet and their intake of, sugar and things. So I'm, the way we tend to process foods and the way fast foods have become so ever present in our society has created a generation of children in which as many as 25% of kids now, teenagers and even younger, are considered overweight or obese even. And this is really unconscionable, because not only do we have children that are carrying way too much weight for their health, but despite all that, they tend to be oxygen deprived for lack of exercise generally, and they also tend to be dehydrated, and a lot of that is because they're drinking Cokes and tea and even coffee and all those kind of things instead of water. And the problem with these things, not just because they're caffeinated, they are diuretics, which means that you will eliminate more liquid than you take in, right? So even though you're drinking a lot of stuff, you're actually dehydrating your body because you're drinking diuretics. And the second reason is that it affects their health is water is essential to health because it flushes out the system. It's a solvent, universal solvent. It will dissolve the toxins in the body and eliminate them from the body. Now, if you're drinking things like Cokes, these are already saturated solutions. So therefore, they cannot serve as the solvent that water is. They can't dissolve toxins in the body and flush them out of the body because they're already saturated solutions. You following me on this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what happens is the body tends to treat them in a different fashion. It treats them more like foods, burns up the caloric content, etc. And they just don't serve the function well of flushing the body of toxins. So you're not not only that, but obvious. I think we all understand how much all of that sugar is going to rot children's teeth and affect their hyperactivity, which is an extremely important thing for children, for parents of children to take to really pay attention to how sugar makes kids really hyperactive and they can't concentrate. And children that may have ADHD problems, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, already, things like too much sugar input can be really, really, really debilitating to them because they've already got problems, and you're just making those problems worse. So these things I find to be extremely important, and I do emphasize them every chance I get. Whenever I have children that I have a little influence on, I will encourage them, or even sometimes we will serve it, oxygen-enriched water, as we drink oxygen-enriched water. And that really pumps up the level of oxygen in the bloodstream. It's very easy to show that. You can just, I've had a specialist, show me my blood, and you'll get, it's very easy to see oxygen deprivation. In fact, if you ever seen a red blood cell on a picture of one, most people have, it kind of looks like it's all concave and all. Do you remember ever seeing slides of blood cells like that?
Yeah.
Red blood cells?
Concave.
Well, that concavity there means they are oxygen deprived, because I will sit there and drink a bottle or two of oxygen-enriched water, and then about 20 minutes the specialist will take my blood sample again and show me, and now all my red blood cells are fat and glowing. That's what a red blood cell should look like. It should look like a sphere. And I mean, really, it literally looks like it's glowing with health. But when you get that concave look to them, they tend to start to stick together like gummy bears. And what they're trying to do is leach off the other blood cells. And once they're full of oxygen, then they're fat and they're separate and they're flowing through the system. Whereas they're all gummed up together when they're oxygen deprived, because they're trying to leach off, they're trying to panhandle off of every other blood cell that comes down the road, that comes down the artery. So these things are, I think that's really a dramatic demonstration of what the problem is, and obviously it's something that's so easy to fix. A decent diet, right, with nutritional supplementation, vitamins, glyconutrients, oxygen, oxygen-enriched water, and avoiding, especially developing habits of all the bad stuff, too much fast food and fats and sugar. And that's not expensive, and it's not, it takes some discipline, of course, but it makes such a huge difference in the health of the child, and the effect of that in the classroom is just enormous. The ability of children to think and focus. You can't go anywhere with them, no matter how good a teacher you are, how good a program you have, if you can't get them to focus on a task and to maintain their concentration. Teaching them to concentrate is important or more important than anything else we do.
Mm. I think we need to get you back to do a whole class on nutrition and all these, what you just gave a brief overview on.
Well, that'd be neat. I'd love to do that.
Oh, great. Then we'll take you up on that. I have a family friend, a very close family friend, who has 6 kids, and she asked the question, how does this work with? She has, I mean, the last one is a baby, well, still about a year old, but the rest are from the first grade all the way to a junior in high school.
Uh-huh.
How can she take advantage of what you just talked about for each of them?
You mean as far as nutrition goes?
No, I was going back to your
curriculum.
Hmm?
Well, you have to have a the curriculum for the level that the child is on. What's her youngest?
The youngest is in first grade. I'm the youngest who is in school in first grade. Yeah.
Right. Well, we have 3 different levels that they can start at, 4 really. Okay, you have your preschool programs, your matrix math and threshold reading, and that's where they know nothing. So you're starting them from scratch. But her youngest is in first grade. They would start math in Math 3, and that's for kids who they understand addition and subtraction concepts. And we will rapidly teach them multiplication and division, but that's where you'd start that child is in Math 3. Now, for students that are a little older, and you said she's got 6 kids, so she's got students that are, say, maybe 10 to 12 years old, and they already know some multiplication division. They understand the concepts anyway. They would start in Super Math 5. And now Super Math 5 will do everything you do in Super Math 3. It'll just go further and faster. It'll go about twice as fast as you would in Super Math 3. But it'll cover much of the same ground, obviously. And then for the kids that are older, like the one she has in high school, there's only one thing we can do with these kids. We have to take them back and make sure they have all of their basic skills. And sometimes you get high school kids, they don't want to go back and clean up their basic skills. But the fact is, it doesn't take them very long to do it, and then they will go on and be able to do the higher level math, because you just can't get there if you keep stumbling over your multiplication tables. And it's amazing how many kids there are out there who don't know multiplication. I'll tell you a story. But we would start those kids in Math 7. And that Math 7 is a lot to do in one semester, because it basically teaches them everything they should have been taught in about 8 years of school in one semester. So that's a lot. It's hard. You got to hit the ground running and get moving. We always test people when we come in, and so I've tested thousands of people, and in mathematics and their basic skills: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Now, let me ask you something. Out of those thousands of people that I've tested, and I train teachers too, so I've done these tests with teachers, with classroom teachers that are in classroom teaching that have a teaching certificate. So I would like for you to tell me, give me a guess, David, how many people do you think I have come across who could score 100 in all 4 tests: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, in the thousands that I've tested? Give me a guess.
3.
We've talked about this before, haven't we? That's right. I've had 3.
Oh,
I've had 3.
I just guessed, really.
I
don't think we...
right.
Really?
I've had 3. I had one teacher that did it. I had one student that did it. And just in the past few weeks, I had one parent who did it. So I've had three people in all that time.
Oh, my.
Have. And this is the thing. Why should it be that rare? Why should it be that rare that out of thousands of people tested? Now, yeah, they're only given 3 minutes, but that's more than enough time if you know the answers. You got to focus and get on it, but that's more than enough time if you know the answers to answer 100 problems. But why should that be rare? I mean, that that is a huge statement about our math education system. Now, when it comes to reading, the problem I always pose to the teachers, and again, I've taught hundreds of teachers easily, well, probably thousands of them too, but in any case, I will always ask them this one question. I'll ask them, it's a phonics question, I'll ask them, how many vowel sounds are there in standard American English? David, what's your guess?
Well, you've asked me this question before. I said 5, but then...
Right. There's 5 letters. There's 5 letters. There's 5 vowel letters, right? But there's long and short vowels, right? So that's already 10. Well, the answer is that there's 15. There's 16 if you want to be technical, right? But there's basically 15 sounds. Now, how many teachers have I had? And these are teachers that teach literacy, right? Many of them. How many have I had that knew that? I've had one. I had one that knew it, and that says it all, if you ask me. I mean, how are you going to teach literacy? How are you going to teach those sounds and how they're spelled if you don't even know how many there are, and your entire education as a teacher never taught you that much about phonics? Well, the fact is you're not. You're just not going to teach it very well, are you?
No.
It's that simple, isn't it? Just like the teacher that is not very good at addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, got a few holes there. They're not going to teach math very well. And the likelihood, and you get a lot of teachers that are math phobic, because we pull our teachers generally from the bottom of the barrel. If you can't do anything else, you can go into education. And well, it actually is true. I'm not saying we don't get some good teachers. We do get teachers that go in there that are very good, but we get a lot that aren't. But if you get a lot of people that go through and they're not very good at math, or they'd be engineers, and they're just they don't like math. They're math phobic, it's called. So it may be that they have enough skill to teach, younger kids, at least the basics, but they really don't like dealing with it because they don't like math. They're math phobic, right? So they don't do a good job at it because they just don't want to concentrate on it. They didn't like it, and they don't like teaching it, right? Really, when you get right down to it. So that's the problem with not teaching our teachers and about these things. When you get into education school, you don't you're not taught a lot of this stuff, right? It's assumed that you already have your basics, and if you don't, no one ever goes back to clean it up.
Right.
Questions?
Is there a training seminar an instructor could benefit from? Do you organize training seminars?
I do. If somebody wants to contact me, they can either call me at 214-546-7893, or they can contact me through the website.
Great.
Yeah, we do. I do training seminars all the time. I love doing that work with parents, with school teachers, or sometimes with industry. We've done that. So yeah.
How do you get? Okay, so go ahead.
No, whatever. We'll just, if they will contact me or email me on what they want to get out of it, I'll certainly communicate back to them whether I think I could do that effectively or appropriately.
Where do you get oxygen-enriched water? I know we had this question the last time.
Yeah, good question. Here in this area, you can get it at Rainfresh Bottled Water Company, and that would be rainfresh.com, RAINFRESH.com. And you can get it, and that's one of the best brands because they filter the water very, very well. They go through 27 filters, and that takes everything out of it. And so when you add the oxygen back in, you add the taste back into it. So the first thing you notice when you drink it is it tastes really good. It tastes different than any other water you've tasted. Certainly a lot better than tap water or anything like that. You've drunk distilled water, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
and it has a very flat taste, right? Because you've taken everything
Right.
out of it. So they put
Right.
the oxygen back into it, and that gives it a really incredible taste to it. So it's great water, and it's guaranteed to be absolutely pure and to be oxygen enriched, about 40 parts per million, I think it is, and that's a high concentration. It's a very high concentration. In fact, athletes drink it. Olympic athletes drink it to improve their times. So they know the oxygen, you burn it to think, you burn it to locomote. So it gives you an edge.
Do you have a program for super writing?
We don't at the moment, but it's one of the things that's on the drawing boards. But you really should start with reading, super reading, because that's where your writing ability comes from. But I consider that in the area of rhetoric, which is an area of instruction which I'm really eager to get into.
Mm-hmm. Well, now we have more of typing than anything else, so typing skills that probably people are looking for. Do you have classes that help prepare people to take the SAT?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of our math classes and our reading classes are designed with that in mind, because the skills are worthy. The skills are worthy of knowing whether you take the SAT and go to college or not. To be able to do rapid mental calculation, speed reading, and memory training, I think everyone should know how to do that, whether they go into college or not. You're going to need to do that stuff. So those are great skills. So we all of our classes are designed to take them into that. So they'll do algebra, and then the next class they'll take will be SAT prep. That'd be Math 9 and Math 10. And
okay, so if a kid has come out of school, just wants to prepare for the SAT and doesn't want to do anything else, just wants you to train him for the SAT, that's possible?
No.
Or you have to go through
I will not train any student that doesn't do the SuperMath. They have to go back to SuperMath 7. And then SuperMath 8 is algebra, and then SuperMath 9, SAT prep. But the SuperMath 8 will give them all the skills that they need to do well on the SAT. They'll still need to practice the SAT, but that will give them all the skills that they need. But if they have a really good education, they shouldn't have any problem in zipping through those materials. They can go as fast as they're capable of going. But what we find is that they've got huge holes, and you're not going to plug those holes by skipping forward to SAT preparation. You see what I mean? So
right.
I'm not willing to put a patch on somebody's poor education or somebody's education. It might be a good education, but there's still some holes in it. I insist the only way I'm going to deal with them by taking them back, filling in the holes, then we can move forward. And the less holes there are, the quicker they can do that. But yeah, we don't do that. We don't do the Kaplan method. We do and the other type of guessing methods. We go back and we fix the fundamental problems that they're facing, and then they will be successful.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you've been doing this for several years now. At what stage are the first kids you started with? College or what?
Well, the children that we started with, Jones's Geniuses, the original group that we did the presentation for to the Mensa conference, they have graduated high school now. So that's just graduated. So makes you feel old, but that's a long time to have been working on it for their entire educational career. So we've been working on these materials for 12 years. Have a lot more to do because the typical way that a curriculum is designed is, you're a math professor, say. Well, I'll call you up and say, okay, I'm going to contract you to write this book. So I want you to write these, this algebra book with 24 chapters and give me, 30 questions at the end of each chapter. So, You go and do that, turn it in, get paid. It's printed up and sold, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we do some things totally different from that. Our materials, we will integrate all the accelerated learning methodology into them. That would be rapid mental calculation and memory training, for example. And we will try them out, see if they work well, and we'll continually refine the materials just really endlessly. It just really never ends. And if we're not, we'll test them. If we're not getting the results we want, we'll go back to the drawing board and redo the whole thing. And so we're really just constantly doing that and constantly finding ways to improve it. So our materials have already been through several additional changes, and there's still a lot that needs to be improved in them, but we just keep refining them. It's never done. So and the whole thing is to find ways to keep making it easier and better, and so that's the way we do curriculum. And also, obviously, I'm an expert in accelerated learning methodology, so I know how to structure them in the first place so that they can be done in an accelerated fashion. So.
How does what you do compare with Maria Montessori, the Montessori school method? I know she does a lot of hands-on and schools and having the kids play and do a lot of other stuff.
Well, I'm not expert in Montessori methods. I know that I do know something about it, and if she uses a lot of manipulatives, and of course this has been pushed in the traditional curriculum. If you go and tell a curriculum specialist that your sixth graders don't know their multiplication tables, you can bet that they'll tell you to use more manipulatives. But to be honest with you, although Maria Montessori got some good results from everything I know, I don't know exactly how to compare what she does to what we do. They've tried to implement these types of approaches in the classroom, and they've gotten some pretty mixed results. There are some very good Montessori teachers, and they go through some very extensive and very demanding training, and they only keep the best ones. They don't keep all of them. So if you're going to put people through that demanding a training program, you're probably going to end up with some pretty good teachers who are going to do a pretty good job. So you get a mixed bag. If it's really well done, then you get really good results, and if it's not, you don't. I tell you what you get in Montessori programs, and this is a big part of the problem. When I would go into school districts like the very here in Dallas, Highland Park is one of the best schools. It's the richest one, and followed by Plano, they're both really, really renowned, very excellent school districts and very prosperous communities. And I was talking to their staff development person, the person in charge of curriculum, and I said, "What methodology do you use to teach reading in first grade?" And he didn't know. Of course, now if I were hiring someone like that, that's the first thing I'd be asking them. But he called in a first grade teacher to answer my question, and I asked her something that should be very instructive. I asked her, "How many of your first grade students can read on day one?" And she looked at me kind of surprised and said, "Well, all of them." So in these prosperous school districts, what's happening is that all the parents have become homeschoolers. Every parent is taking responsibility for their child's literacy because they know the school districts cannot be trusted to handle it. They will put their kids in effective preschool programs. They will teach them themselves, or they will somehow manage to make sure they get into programs that will have them reading and reading early. It's the biggest difference. Remember, early learning is the single most effective thing you can do to accelerate your child's education. And these young professional parents, they know what it takes to get ahead, and they are paying attention and making sure that their child learns how to read no matter what has to happen. to make that occur. Whether they have to teach their kids, and a lot of them are teaching their kids themselves to read, right? Or whether they get them in a really good program, a preschool program that will teach them to read, costs more money. Now when you go into an inner city school, all right, and you go into a first grade classroom, you know how many kids you're going to have that read already?
Less than 10%, I'm sure.
Oh, you may have one or two.
Really?
Yeah, you may have one or two. And those parents, they care. They care a lot about their child's education. They have they place a very high value on education. They just don't know what to do.
Right.
Their parents may not know how to read, or may only be able to read in Spanish, or just literally don't know what to do with their children. Don't have money for books, don't have the time to sit down and work with their kids, and wouldn't know how to do it anyway. So this is the basic difference. Not that they don't have values, they care, but those professional parents up in those rich school districts, and you know what, when you get kids in first grade that every child can read, you can use any method. It doesn't matter. They can already read. It doesn't matter. So Montessori methods are great because, it's really a bunch of creative, hands-on type of stuff. Hey, that's all great for kids that can already read, but these other kids that can't read, they need direct instruction, be taken hand by hand through all the steps that they need to go through. They need to be taught all the sound symbol correspondences, all the letters and their sounds, and how to blend them together. And if you don't do that, if that's not a part of your program, then the kids are not going to learn to read well. You can't just push books at them, no matter how simple the books are, and expect they're going to pick it up. I'm not saying some of them won't, because kids are smart, and some kids will somehow pick it up, even if you didn't teach them. But even those kids, but half the kids at least, just really will not be able to. You must teach them directly. And a lot of that is very individual, making sure each kid gets through each step and the mastery skills they need to know in order to learn how to read. It's not okay that you taught the T sound to all the kids unless every single one of them got it. You got to make sure each kid gets every one of those mastery skills they have to know. And a lot of that is very individualized. So a good Montessori teacher that does that, they'll get good results. If they happen to leave that out of their program, no matter how clever it is and how many manipulatives they use, it won't work. And I've seen a lot of programs that were Montessori based that were not effective because they were not paying attention to their priority objectives. They didn't seem to be able to see the forest for the trees and be able to understand that teaching those teaching those early phonics skills and those early math skills were really the most important ones. We can take an example of the Better Baby program. You may have heard of that, maybe?
No.
And they would flash cards with Monet paintings and different types of birds and all kinds of really secondary stuff is secondary or tertiary importance. Okay, so maybe your kid can recognize Monet's water lilies. That's great, but they don't know the alphabet. They don't know the numbers. Those are the things that are really important. I mean, I take my kids and start them at 2 if I have them that young, and they learn to read and do math at 2. So by the time they're 3, they're reading on a second grade level and doing addition, subtraction, and memory training. And then by the time they're 4, they're reading on a 3rd or 4th grade level, and probably starting on multiplication, division, and doing their 2nd level of memory training. And we're talking about kids that are 4 now. They're not even old enough to go to preschool, hardly in some places. They can't even go to kindergarten yet. So by the time they get to kindergarten, why would you want to put them in kindergarten? They're way ahead. The traditional education will only hold them back. So that's the challenge of working with kids in an accelerated learning environment, is that where do you go from there?
Right.
That's why we're dedicated our ministry to, being able to take them somewhere from there and, go somewhere with it.
I'm interested in finding out how your kids who have just graduated from high school do in college. See how they do with it.
Yeah, we have children that have gone through our SAT training, which is not complete yet, but it certainly is getting them up there to where they need to be, and they've made really excellent scores. I think we had one of our last students made a 1720. Let me see what I'm thinking. I gave you a wrong. I think I gave you a wrong score. He made a 720 out of 800, which is a very high score. So that's a very good score. We had another student who had gone through Math 8, and then at the Homeschool Association he was at. His name is Joel Purrier. They didn't have anyone to teach Math 8, but he'd just been through it. So he turned around and he taught the course to the students coming along behind him. And then as a result of that, he went over to the community college and applied for work as a tutor. And they put him on and gave him a job tutoring college kids in mathematics, because he was so well prepared, having been a super math teacher of algebra, that he was literally capable of teaching community college students at the age of 16. So
wow.
I think that's
wow.
the power. That's the power of what he was doing, because he just really understood the basics really well, and obviously a brilliant young man, and he was able to tutor in courses that he was taking at the same time as they were. He did a wonderful thing there.
Wow, folks! I think we're going to wrap it up tonight, because they just keep on coming in. But folks, if you do have any more questions, you have his information, you have his cell phone, you have his website. So go ahead and ask him. You can send your questions and emails to him or to us if you need to. Dr. Jones, thank you so much for this.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, David. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're definitely going to be having you back again, as long as you accept our invitations.
I will.
All right, appreciate it. Well, folks, you have a great weekend, and God bless. Thanks for joining us on the webinar. See you next week, Thursday. There's going to be a webinar on radiation, how to protect your body against radiation, and how to increase the balance of your nervous system and your endocrine system, so you can protect yourself against the damaging toxins that are out there. All right, well, that's it. See you next week.